A steel hull, hundreds of feet below the surface, offers only two futures. Outside, water pressure capable of collapsing bone. Inside, an invisible gas thickening with every exhaled breath until the air itself becomes the executioner. 99 men chose to wait in the dark. What sealed their fate was smaller than a fingernail. A single drop of paint. Liverpool, the 1st of June 1939. The forensic record shows 103 men crossing the gangway that morning, though the vessel was designed to carry roughly half that number. 51 Royal Navy crew, 26 engineers from Camel Laird, the company that built her, Admiralty officials, Vickers Armstrong technicians, 2 caterers, even a harbour pilot along for the ride. This was meant to be routine. A final sea trial before commissioning, before Thetis earned her place in His Majesty's fleet. Nobody boarded expecting a funeral. Picture the deck that morning. Men in overalls comparing notes with men in naval blue. The two worlds of industry and service mixing easily, almost cheerfully the way they do when everyone believes the hardest work is already behind them. The hull had been tested on paper 100 times. This dive was meant to confirm what the engineers already knew, that Thetis was sound, ready, safe. The procedure that would kill them was, on paper, foolproof. Before any torpedo tube's inner door could be opened, a test cock, a small valve barely the width of a pencil, had to be checked first. If water sprayed out, the tube was flooded and the door stayed shut. If nothing came out, the tube was declared dry, safe. This was the entire safety interlock, one small valve standing between 103 men in the Irish Sea. Lieutenant Frederick Woods, the torpedo officer, followed that procedure exactly. He checked the test cock on tube number 5. Nothing emerged. By every rule he'd been trained on, that meant the tube was empty, safe to open. But here's what the forensic examination later revealed. The aperture of that test cock had been coated at some point during construction with enamel paint. Not sabotage, not malice, just an ordinary maintenance oversight. The kind that happens on any industrial site, on any given Thursday. A careless brushstroke, applied months earlier by someone who never imagined it would outlive the man who painted it. A single obstruction, invisible to the eye, sitting inside a valve designed to be humanity's last line of defense against catastrophic flooding. Woods trusted the reading. Why wouldn't he? Every system told him it was safe. There was no gauge, no secondary check, nothing capable of contradicting what that small dry valve seemed to confirm. He gave the order. The inner door swung open, and the ocean answered. Tube number 5 wasn't empty at all. It was open to the sea, its outer door already unsealed for testing. What followed wasn't a leak. It was hundreds of tons of seawater, forced through a corridor barely wide enough for a man to crawl through, slamming into the forward compartments with the force of a collapsing building. The false sense of security had lasted less than a second. What came next would last for days. Sit with what that impact would have felt like. Not a slow list, not a gentle tilt, a violent, immediate nose-down lurch, as if the deck itself had been kicked out from under every man standing on it. Tools, equipment, bodies thrown forward, into bulkheads, into each other. Some of the injuries suffered in those first seconds happened before anyone even understood what was flooding. Therefore, the men in the rear compartments had almost no warning. One moment, routine trial procedure. The next, the deck sloping beneath their feet at an angle no submarine should ever hold. Thetis was designed to glide, to hover, to answer to careful trim adjustments. Instead, she was diving, nose first, uncontrolled, into the seabed of the Irish Sea, 12 miles from Liverpool Bay, a location close enough to touch the coastline on a map, and yet, in that moment, as isolated as the deepest trench in the ocean. The bow struck the mud at a depth of 160 feet. The sound of that impact, steel driving into seabed sediment, would have echoed through the entire hull. And then, nothing. No further movement, no forward momentum. Just the submarine, buried nose down in the mud, her stern tilted upward, motionless. For the 99 men in the unflooded rear compartments, this stillness should have felt like safety. It didn't. Because stillness meant something else too. It meant no signal had reached the surface, no distress call acknowledged, no response from anyone anywhere who might know they were down here at all. Consider the psychological weight of that particular silence. These were trained naval personnel and skilled engineers, men who understood pressure hulls, understood exactly how deep 160 feet actually was. This wasn't ignorance, this was informed dread, the kind that comes from knowing precisely how much trouble you're in. The forward compartments were gone, flooded entirely, the men inside them beyond any hope of rescue. The rear compartments held, the bulkhead had sealed. 99 men remained alive, breathing, thinking, waiting. But the mathematics of that survival had already begun working against them. A submarine's rear compartments hold a finite volume of air, and air in a sealed steel chamber is not an unlimited resource. It is a countdown. Here is the calculation nobody aboard could escape. Thetis was built to comfortably sustain a standard crew for approximately 36 hours on the air, trapped in her compartments, after an incident like this. That figure assumed a normal complement, roughly 50 men, not 103. But the overcrowding that morning, all those extra engineers, officials, technicians brought along to observe the trial, meant nearly double the bodies were consuming that same fixed volume of oxygen. Therefore, the true survival window wasn't 36 hours at all. It was 18, cut in half, silently, by a boarding decision made hours before anyone dove. Understand what that number actually represents in human terms. Every breath drawn by every man in that compartment pulled oxygen from a shared, shrinking reservoir and pushed carbon dioxide back into it. Metabolic output doesn't pause for a crisis. It accelerates under stress, under fear, under physical exertion. More people breathing harder, faster, in a smaller effective space per person. The gas exchange happening in every human chest became, quite literally, the mechanism of their undoing. Carbon dioxide poisoning does not arrive like a wound. It arrives like drowsiness, a dull headache first, then disorientation, an odd tightness behind the eyes, a mental fog that men trained for emergencies would have recognized it. There was no visible enemy to fight, no fire, no flooding they could see with their own eyes in the rear compartments. Just the air itself growing steadily more lethal with every exhale, in a process invisible to human senses until it was already well underway. Some men would have felt it as fatigue, a heaviness in their limbs they couldn't explain. Others, as a strange creeping euphoria. Carbon dioxide narcosis can produce something disturbingly close to calm, right before it produces collapse. A few, according to the forensic record, reported nothing at all, simply drifting towards sleep and never fully surfacing from it. They rationed movement, rationed conversation. Every unnecessary motion, every unnecessary word, was oxygen spent that could not be recovered. Men who under ordinary circumstances would have paced, argued, planned aloud, instead sat still, deliberately conserving what little they had left to burn. Consider the discipline that required. Trained men, watching a clock they couldn't see, rationing their own breath the way a castaway rations water, knowing that panic itself was now a form of self-destruction. Above them, 12 miles from shore, in water shallow enough that rescue should have been almost simple, ships were already gathering, engines idling, sonar equipment searching the seabed. They had no idea the men below could still hear them. 13 hours. That's how long Thetis sat submerged, nose buried in the mud, before anyone attempted the maneuver that might have saved them all. The crew inside made a calculated decision. Dump everything not essential to survival, anything with weight, anything expendable. 60 tons of drinking water and fuel oil released into the sea in a desperate attempt to lighten the stern enough to force it toward the surface. Every gallon released was a gamble. Water they might need later, traded for a chance at rising now. It worked. The stern of Thetis broke the surface of the Irish Sea, exposed to open air for the first time in over half a day. Somewhere above, on the rescue vessel circling that position, someone would have seen it, a dark shape, rising from beneath the waves, angled and unmistakable, steel where there should have only been water. For every man still conscious in that stern compartment, that moment must have felt like vindication. Proof the ordeal was ending. Proof someone up there could finally reach them. Some would have pressed their palms against the cold hull, as if they could feel the open air just beyond it, close enough to touch, and still impossibly far. A salvage line, a hawser, was secured to the exposed section, the surface crew preparing to hold the stern in place to stabilize it, to begin the agonizing work of extraction. But the calculations made in that moment hadn't accounted for what was still holding the bow. Hundreds of tons of submarine buried in seabed mud, generating a suction force far beyond what anyone on the surface had estimated. The weight distribution wasn't simple physics anymore. It was submarine versus ocean floor. And the ocean floor had not agreed to let go. The hawser strained, held for a moment, then snapped. That single word carries the entire tragedy of this chapter. Snapped. And with it, the only physical connection between rescue and rescued, severed in an instant no one on either side of that line could control. The stern dropped back beneath the surface. Thetis returned to the darkness she'd occupied for 13 hours, this time with no remaining plan, no remaining leverage, nothing left to dump, nothing left to try. Whatever hope had surged through that stern compartment in the moments the hull broke free, it sank again, just as fast, just as completely. Above the waterline, rescue ships continued their search, their propellers churning the same patch of sea, again and again, searching for a vessel that had just been visible minutes earlier and was now once more invisible. Below, in the dark, 99 men understood exactly what that sound meant. What happened next unfolded not in minutes, but across days, a slow procedural death that the forensic record can reconstruct almost hour by hour. The Davis submerged escape apparatus offered a narrow, desperate exit route, a breathing set designed to let a man ascend through open water to the surface. In theory, every man aboard could have used one at a time through the escape chamber. In practice, only 4 ever made it out alive. Leading stoker Walter Arnold, fitter Frank Shaw. 2 others among the 99 who attempted what amounted to a controlled drowning in reverse, flooding a small chamber, equalizing to crushing pressure, then ascending 160 feet through frigid dark water, fighting the physiological chaos of nitrogen and panic the entire way. Petty Officer Otho Pardew, among those attempting to assist the rescue effort from outside, died from decompression sickness, the bends, a reminder that even those trying to help were operating at the absolute limit of what human physiology can survive. For the men who remained inside, the Davis gear became less an escape plan and more a mathematics problem with no acceptable answer. Attempt the ascent and risk drowning, or the bends, or disorientation, in total darkness. Or wait, and let the compartment's atmosphere continue its silent chemical betrayal. Most chose to wait, and so, in the dark, with breathable air narrowing toward its final measured hours, men who had boarded that morning expecting a routine trial instead began writing letters to wives, to mothers, to children who wouldn't understand, not yet, why their fathers weren't coming home. Some letters were practical, instructions about pay, about pensions, about who should be told first. Others were nothing but a name, repeated, and the word sorry. Above them, close enough that the sound would have carried through steel and seawater, the searching propellers of rescue vessels moved back and forth, fruitlessly scanning a patch of ocean 12 miles wide, unable to relocate a hull that had already surfaced once and vanished again. The men below could hear those engines, could hear rescue, directly overhead, unable to find them. That sound alone, steady, mechanical, so close and so useless, became its own particular form of suffering, a reminder that proximity is not the same as salvation. Carbon dioxide poisoning, in its final stages, does not announce itself with pain. It arrives as a kind of narrowing, awareness dimming, thought slowing, the body simply beginning to shut down its most demanding functions first. Cellular starvation, methodical and merciless, working through every man simultaneously, at roughly the same pace, in roughly the same darkness. 99 men, up to 40 hours of consciousness, deteriorating by degrees, inside a steel tube resting on the floor of the Irish Sea. They did not die instantly, they died slowly, together, listening. The bodies remained inside Thetis for 4 months. The submarine wasn't salvaged until September, brought ashore at Traith Baitan, on Anglesey, where the 99 men finally received a naval funeral with full honours, a delayed grim ceremony for a disaster the entire nation had followed in real time. The tribunal of inquiry that followed didn't stop at the paint. It couldn't. Forensic examination of the wreck, combined with testimony from survivors and salvage crews, revealed a chain of failures far wider than one block test cock. Improper sealing procedures for torpedo tubes across the fleet, crew unfamiliarity with emergency protocols that should have been second nature under pressure, communication breakdowns between the trapped men and surface rescue teams that turned a survivable window into a fatal one. No single failure caused this disaster. A blocked valve triggered it, but training gaps, procedural gaps, and communication gaps sealed it. That's the detail most people miss. It's tempting to blame a drop of paint and stop there. The forensic record won't allow it. Systemic failure rarely announces itself as one dramatic mistake. It's usually a dozen small ones, stacked quietly, waiting for the one day they all align. The recommendations that followed rewrote submarine safety testing permanently. Stricter tube clearing verification, redesigned test cocks resistant to obstruction, overhauled emergency training standards adopted across the Royal Navy. Procedures that, in some form, still govern how submarines are tested today. But the forensic record holds one final entry, and it is the cruelest one. Thetis was salvaged, repaired, and recommissioned in October of 1940 as HMS Thunderbolt, a new name, meant to separate her from the disaster that nearly ended her before she ever saw active service. On the 14th of March 1943, off the coast of Sicily, the Italian corvette Ciconia located her. Every man aboard Thunderbolt was lost. The same hull. 2 disasters, 4 years apart, on opposite sides of a war neither crew had control over. A vessel that survived, one grave only to find another. Somewhere beneath the Mediterranean tonight, that hull still rests. The same steel that once trapped 99 men in the Irish Sea, now holding a second crew in a second silence for good. If cases like this, where forensic detail reveals what official reports leave out, are the reason you're still here, subscribe to Forensic Protocol. The record always holds one more entry than the headline does.